You want to do that first or do that second?
No, because that would be correspondence action listed. No, we'll just add it to new business.
How much government? Okay.
Section E, acquisition, disposition, or exploration of land or disturbance. If the council considers all
Sorry. I see that.
Are we live?
Most of my camera's on too.
Yes, we are. And yes.
And we have 3 more minutes.
Is that the one we cover in? There's one on the legend that's it.
Yeah, that's right. And he has the one that's plugged into the snowballs.
And that's the thing that picks up the other for the whole room.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Call the meeting to order. I want to acknowledge the Smoking Valley in which we learn, work, and organize the ancestor tradition of all unceded territories with whose people and as home of the Upper Smoking Indian Band. Before we continue though, we have to add 2 new items. 11.1, which is a letter that we just received from Jerry Maynard, the Literacy Outreach Coordinator. And we have a 90.1 section E. Motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Howard.
Second.
Councilor Gould, all in favor? Carried. And with that, we will go into staff reports. 2023 budget financial plan. James. Please take it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, I was asked to present our public consultation documents and just touch on the budget as presented. So everyone kind of understands our structure and our how it's piece together and how everything kind of matches. And then we've already had a couple of questions on it, so we will answer those in the process. Break right into it here. So our overview today, touch very briefly on the public consultation process and a little bit on how the budget gets created starting in August and then moving forward to where we are now, and then where we want to be come before May 12th, which is our statutory deadline for having the financial plan passed. So we'll review the bylaw and how that matches our budget process. We'll go over some oversight into the numbers and drill down how they are derived and what they mean in real and absolute terms for the average taxpayer. And then we will review some revenues and how they fit into the picture as well. So the public consultation process, we got the second reading last council meeting. So the budget process starts in August of the previous fiscal year. In that August, we solicit from staff, department heads, and directors capital ideas, capital plans, status of current capital projects, and whether they will require carry forward funding because they are recommended to carry forward into the next year, or we have capital projects that are no longer required or no longer within council's vision. We try to do as much of that legwork as possible before we go into strategic planning. Once we get to strategic planning in September or October, and council participates, those specific staff projects can be added, can sometimes be removed. But we want to present as close to what we have visions for the capital plan as possible, so that council can submit their vision, and we hope that they mesh together. But if they do not, then council's vision takes precedence, and we alter our capital plan accordingly. Into October, November is when we add the operational plan. The operational budget is mostly derived from previous year's experience. If we have specific outliers, they can be adjusted to meet statistical norms. Plus we add financial information that's current. This year, obviously, with inflation being the way it is, that was a major component in this year's budget. And those numbers are tallied and presented for budget deliberations in December. In December, as per our budget policy, we're required to pass first reading. So those numbers, especially the capital items, can get into the regional district. If they're required to place requisitions in their budget. And then through the month of January, January 1st, or first business day afterwards is usually when the completed roll comes out from BC Assessment. So we're able to have our first picture into what municipal tax rates are going to look like. Those numbers are calculated, and the budget revenue numbers can be adjusted accordingly for that number. February, March, we usually try and get the second reading, which is the presentation of the financial plan, which is basically taking the budget document and turning it into a formal bylaw that the province can understand. Because our financial plan goes into the province. It is the primary tool that the province can understand what kind of capital projects we're carrying on. If we're not in compliance with bylaws, it shows that we are actively working toward fulfilling requirements, and they do look at it very seriously in the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and the Ministry of Finance. So we get to second reading. Once we get to second reading, then we can start the public consultation process. That's the point where we're at now. The public consultation process, we essentially make a presentation like we're doing today that show how the budget matches up to the financial plan, what council's priorities are, what we're spending money on, and And if there are any modifications to be made, the public can submit ideas, council can submit ideas, anyone can submit ideas. Those are condensed and brought to council during a future session or a future meeting of council. We're hoping to do third reading for the first council meeting in April. If we can get there, if there are no major concerns from council, with eventual adoption on the second meeting of council on in the middle of April. So that is largely our budget process. Once we adopt our budget, it still needs to be transcribed into a way the province can understand. It's submitted electronically before May 12th. That is in the community charter. And we go about 2 months of non-budgetary discussions before we start again the next August of the next year. So it's a fairly ongoing process. There are questions that come up on it all the time, and but this is the specific period that is the most relevant for questions, comments, and input. So if anyone's watching online, the 3 methods that we prefer that are communicated to finance via email at finance@princeton.ca is a preferred method. It gives us a written record of the consultation, and we have that on record electronically. Via drop-off, so we do receive letters. They can be dropped off anytime during business hours at the front counter, or they can be put in a mailbox and they will come back to you. Or by phone call to the finance department. It's more for clarification purposes. We don't submit public consultation to council by phone. There's just too many ways that the message can be muddled. So if there are any actual written confirmations, we ask that they be put in writing. Comments should be received by March 29th to be forwarded to council for deliberation and third reading. That is the Wednesday beforehand. That's our council procedures bylaw requires us to have all reports in by the Wednesday before council meeting. Any questions on the public consultation process? In this year, I will add that we are strongly considering having an in-person meeting for the first time in 3 years, the week of the 27th, so that anyone who wants to come in and ask specific questions can do so face to face. Budget design. So our budget is a requirement. We call the 2023 portion our actual budget. 2024 through 2027 is required to be put in to the financial plan by the community charter. However, it is conceptual in nature because we pass a financial plan every year. We have a chance to deliberate 24 in 2024. So we can actually update this to be as current as possible. We don't have to design the 2027 budget right now. We have lots of time to think into the future on that. This presentation will focus on our 2023 budgetary values. We assume that, or as a finance director, we assume that the financial plan bylaw is read first, and this is more of a supplement to it. So if you have any questions, refer to the bylaw first, because that's what we're actually passing. Okay, so our budget is always divided into a capital and an operational budget. All revenues are derived, or all revenues are applied first and then distributed to the operational budget. And we will wind up at our net revenues minus expenses from that number. From that number, money is put into deferred revenue or is put into reserves, which are then applied to the capital budget. So if we're buying, for example, a fire truck in 2024, the money that is used and saved up in the 2023 budget will be the net revenues over expenses and then put into a reserve for future years. If we receive money for a future financial plan, it's put into deferred revenue. If it is spent in the current year, then it is applied to the capital budget after the operational budget. That way we always know that we have a source of funds for our capital budget. Our operational budget are primarily, the source of funds are user fees and property taxation. There are certain grants, but operational grants are very few and far between. We also categorize the budget into separate departments for ease of use of financial management. So each department gets a budget. They're expected to follow their total budget and their operational budgets as much as possible. If there are any changes to be made within the line items, within reason, they can be decided at the staff level. If any increase in the budget is needed, it has to go in front of council. Important to note that. Capital departmental budgets are categorized by project with all costs expensed then adjusted into the asset base for the capital asset policy of the municipality. So we don't actually, when at the end of the day, when we do our financial reporting, the financial reporting puts the capital expenses into the asset base. They're not necessarily considered as operational expenses. So we don't mix the two, is what we're trying to say. Operational departmental budgets are categorized to fit the operations of the department. So we also largely define all departmental budgets as labor, materials, and subcontractors. So that way it's easy to figure whether a department is driven by labor costs or whether it's driven by materials and subcontractors. It's an important distinction to make, because when it comes to materials and subcontractors, those can be highly variable and subject to strong inflationary pressures. Labor less so. Labor is much more fixed. So the hiring and firing of people is significant in people's lives. We don't like to do that flippantly. And it's also much more controlled due to collective agreements with unions. The rate of increases of especially non-exempt staff is very static from year to year. Any questions on the budget design so far? Okay. Capital budget. So the capital budget is made up of new projects that get added on in 2023, which are recommended by either council or staff, and carry forward projects from 2022 and previous years. Council debates the project list in its entirety and approves both projects and sources of funds for both new and carry forward project or strategic planning sessions. So anytime that council has an issue with a capital plan, it should be brought to the attention of staff, and it can be adjusted upwards, downwards, as council's wish is. While the budget is in the conceptual stage, we attempt to add as many projects as possible under the capital banner, so they can be debated and prioritized. As per the tax rate policy of the town of Princeton, capital projects, we do our best to ensure that grants are maximized. You'll notice that when we go through the capital budget, about 70% of the financial or the capital budget is grant funded. So it is important to note that staff does their level best to make sure that grants cover as much as possible and really reduce the burden to taxpayers as much as we can. The capital budget is detailed in Schedule C. So we now have a very detailed capital plan that describes the purpose, it describes sources of funds, it describes maximum expenditure, and it gives a very good indication as to staff's ability to pull off this project. The capital projects are only performed if the source of funds are available. So I gave the example in the PowerPoint of the Aquatic Center. The Aquatic Center is not in the budget currently, as the sources of funds, there is no conclusive date as to when we would receive a grant to be able to fulfill a project like that. If there was a grant that appeared, then we would move to solidify that within the capital plan for the year. but as it stands now, because there is no realistic opportunity to schedule that project, it stays off the financial plan. Any questions about the capital budget? Okay. Forward. Operational budget. So the 2023 operational budget is designed to support, and that should, I beg your pardon, that's, I meant to update this slide and it hasn't been updated. So the operational budget is designed to support a 7% increase in labor, materials, and subcontractors for the 2022 budget cycle. Statistics Canada has reported the CPI this year is 6.8%. So 7% is deemed a reasonable amount to shift that amount. Where significant increases have occurred over and above that 7% threshold between 19 and 22, we chose to note it and present it separately in this presentation. It is a competitive marketplace, so you have to understand the majority of town operational expenses are public works expenses, they are recreational expenses, and a lot of these expenses get derived from materials and subcontractors in a competitive marketplace. So we compete with the mine, we compete with the mill, we compete with private enterprise, we compete with other cities and major business centers. So if we want to get a contractor to do a water pipe in Princeton, if that contractor finds a more lucrative offer to do that in Kelowna or Seminar, and they're the only people who will do this project, we compete with out-of-town suppliers if local suppliers are available. So it's important to note that restricting the operational budget too much can restrict our operations in their entirety. If we have a failure in the arena and we don't have enough money in the budget to fix the problem in the arena, then the arena can't operate. So we really try and maintain our methodologies when it comes to the operational budget. Unspent amounts become reserves in future years. Excess expenditures will be forced to be taken out of reserves and applied to the budget through an amendment to the financial plan at the first available opportunity. We don't. I've never had to do that in 5 years. Hopefully we never have a problem where we go over our operational budget when it comes to the department itself. Any questions on the operational budget? Okay, so we will break into the expenses of the operational budget. Typically we have, this is an example slide. So we'll have a chart on the right-hand side that will show the absolute budget, what the category is within the 2023 budget, and this year I've added how much that would be as a burden to the average residential taxpayer within the town of Princeton. Line items will be detailed on the left-hand side, giving understanding as to what each line item means, and if there are any changes or there are any increases over and above the 7% operational amount, they'll be detailed as the last section. So these are expenses by department. The chart on the right shows the share of expenses in different budgetary amounts. We put the dollar amounts in there to represent the home valued at that should read the average house this year was $399,000. So the tax bill on an average house at $399,000 would be $964.53 for the fiscal year. Water and sewer don't show up. Water and sewer are considered services, so they have separate user fees. The taxes should be zero applied to those two departments. And it is important to note, just the last point there, that more than 70% of all municipal expenses are spent on 5 different departments: public works, parks and recreation, waste management, water and sewer. So those are 5 primary points. So well, it's always good to find efficiencies in every department. So we are being valuable stewards of taxpayers' money. Buying 3 red pens instead of 2 is not necessarily going to save us financially. It's we really like to key in on the larger departments. So we'll break it down by department. The departments are not necessarily the same as a management department. They are historical, so we can do comparisons from year to year to year, but they are easily broken down into departmental budgets. So the first one that comes up is general government. Sources of funds, sale of services for professional fees, municipal taxation for other line items. Things like the building inspector are also subsidized through the sale of building permits. Development costs are also offset through development fees. Changes. So we have put in the budget requesting a new administrative staff. We have 2 separate locations for town operations starting this year. So a new administrative staff will be important so that we have proper safety coverage. We need at least 2 people in each town office, and we have currently 3 admin staff. So we never want anyone to be left by themselves. In a situation they be left by themselves. So that's the reason why we have a new administrative staff. We also have half a full-time equivalent bylaw staff. And we have, last year we hired a building inspector using provincial emergency funding. This year we have that as the same amount we used last year. However, the sources of funds will disappear, and the municipality will be asked to take on that amount. Discretionary grants, very similar to previous years. $20,000 for grant and aids to local nonprofits, and $25,000 for the facade. I beg your pardon, that's backwards. $25,000 for the grants and aid, and $20,000 for the facade improvement. It was strongly suggested during the budget period of increasing the facade improvement grant so more people would take advantage of it. However, in staff's opinion, the program is not oversubscribed yet. When it does become oversubscribed, that would be the point to bring more money to the table on that program. Grants and aids to nonprofits, $25,000. I think last year council approved $18,000, and I have the grant and aids in hand, and there is not a substantial increase or decrease in it. So. The only changes to this year, last year we had flood grants that were included in that amount. We received money from the South Okanagan Community Services to distribute to local residents for recovery of their properties. And that money has been exhausted, so that money has been removed from the expenses.
There was one grant though that somebody donated money that we're going to give to that had an attachment to it.
That's on the capital side. Any other questions on discretionary grants? Forward. Protective services. So municipal taxation, when it comes to capital, there's a fire department capital budget that will come into play. It's not on this chart. This chart only distributes the operational budgets. And some of these expenses are also partially funded with the cost sharing agreement for the regional district, specifically when it comes to capital items. There is a provincial, no, not in this part, I think you're right. There are no real changes to this budget. It's just the inflationary increase. Roughly the fire department was fairly happy from last year to this year. We had no major increases, and everything is within tolerance. Emergency program. So the source of funds are municipal taxation. This is an exception to the a lack of grants for operational expenditures. We receive a large Fire Smart grant each year. That funds the vast majority of that Fire Smart program that's in yellow. The rest of the programs are funded through municipal taxation on an annual basis. We also do receive a small operational grant for the Restorative Justice Program for the Ministry of Youth and Care. Any questions on emergency program funding? Okay. BC Transit. So 100% of BC Transit is spent on BC Transit. There's only one line item in this budget. BC Transit is funded by sales of transit fares and passes. We have partial grant funding from 3 different sources, the Regional District of Local Governments Milcoming, the Village of Carameas, and the Interior Health Authority. They pay for roughly 35% of the spending in this budget. The rest is covered under municipal taxation. This budget may shift slightly in future years. There's some discussion on changing the burden for this program.
We're hoping. It depends on provincial modeling.
So just for clarity, the largest part of that 35% comes from Interior Health, not
Yes.
the other regional partners. The other regional partners only put in a few $1,000s between them, and the rest comes from Interior Health. And the town of Princeton funds the rest of that budget.
It's north of 30% is Interior Health. It's less than 5% is the Regional District and the Village of Carameas.
That's why we're looking at moving it to regional service. So we're not subsidizing the entire service right now.
That's right. We do, the town of Princeton does have the majority of ridership. However, it's not to the extent that the funding is out.
It's like 56 or something.
Yeah. So it's important to note that we do use it, but we also pay for a larger portion of it. Any other comments or questions on transit? Economic development. So the sources of funds are largely municipal taxation for the operational side of the funding. Capital funding is done through land sales, recovery grants, economic development grants, and there's very little taxation. There's very little taxation portion because of the capital portions of economic development. Again, it is roughly the same as previous years. The only change this year as to previous years is that we've added conferences back into it. There are in-person conferences that economic development can participate in for the promotion of the town of Princeton, and that's been re-added into the budget. It's important to also note that there are several operational departments, economic development, public works, recreation, water, and sewer are the 5 that share what they call an administrative support line item. So a large part of the administrative support that gets spent will be divided into 5 portions and distributed amongst each department so that each department takes the portion of the burden of administration and not strictly general government. Any questions on economic development? Visitor information. So a large portion of the Visitor Information Center is funded through municipal taxation. There is a small portion that is supplemented by sales of goods at the Visitor Center. We receive a Destination BC grant every year, which also supplements the funding.
How much is that grant?
The grant is $18,500. It has not changed in at least 5 years.
It's a very small portion of our.
A very small portion of it. The Visitor Center is probably about a $250,000 to $300,000 operation annually. 18.5 does the scratch and service. The only changes is a half a full-time equivalent additional staff member added in 2023. so we can achieve 7-day coverage on the visitor center. The numbers have been increasing strongly, and staff find that 7-day coverage can make those numbers even better. It's a great facility to display our community and provides a valuable service. Any questions on the visitor information center? Public Works. So again, our largest operational budget. I won't review each line item. They're fairly self-explanatory. First, the funds. Most of Public Works funds are through municipal taxation. There's not a lot of opportunities to bill for Public Works. There's a very, very small portion when we have to do work to private property that we will actually invoice for our services and collect accordingly. However, it's a very small portion of what we do. As most other municipalities in British Columbia, we really try and restrict doing work to private property unless they ask us to do that work for private property. Water and sewer tend to do a little bit more work with public property, hooking up new construction, turning off water services, things of that nature, but Public Works itself, save for a couple of very specific circumstances, do not do work to private property. Capital budget, funded through reserves, funded through taxation, funded through gas tax funding. So a lot of our paving programs, a lot of our sidewalk programs are done through UBCM gas tax funding. It's important to note that the agreement between the Union of British Columbia Municipalities and the Government of Canada expires in March 2024. So as of yet, they have not renegotiated that contract, and we have no idea what that contract will look like in the future. So we hope that it will be similar to what we have now or slightly better, but there's been no indication of how that program is going to look. Having said that, there's a list of the categories.
So James, just out of curiosity, if that program does not come back, we're gonna have a kind of a shortfall of what, about 190,000 a year?
It really varies. Some years the federal government, especially during times of surplus, will double it. During the COVID epidemic, they doubled it. They don't usually, there's a baseline of funding, and then sometimes they supplement it. So it can be anywhere between $175,000 to almost $400,000 a year. So I have a feeling that they'll renew it at the last minute, but I can't say for sure. It is a weakness of the municipality that should be noted that we don't have the candidates. So those are the categories. Again, I will let you read it through. EV charging stations is a little bit of an anachronism. Back in the day, we actually had EV charging stations that would bill us for the electricity, and we would receive revenue on it on a non-profit basis. So what we receive, basically our expenses would be billed out and replaced with funding from BC Hydro. BC Hydro has ended that program and is now fully private, so we have nothing to do with EV charging stations within the town limits at this point.
Even the ones that are on the visitor center?
That's right. Okay. And then the pie chart, which is very busy, I admit, because it's a large department. It has a lot of categories to it. I'll point out a couple of specific ones that I think council would be germane about, but feel free to ask any questions that need to be asked. General wages represents $753,000 for the current fiscal year. That's actually down from previous years. In the previous years, there has been a marked increase in overtime, which I've noticed has decreased in 2022 from 2019 through 21 levels. So I have adjusted the number accordingly to base the number on full-time equivalencies and a reasonable amount of overtime that I would expect from this department. We do have an extra full-time equivalent being added to this in the form of a horticulturalist. We also have, as I said, a reasonable amount of overtime. We also have one full-time equivalent position that is vacant, I believe, at this point.
So talking about the overtime, council at some point, I don't know when it was, passed a resolution to have a overtime policy. Is that, you guys working on that still, or are we at on that?
We haven't got a policy drafted at this point, but we definitely have conveyed the lower council to the staff, and they've definitely dialed it down.
So obviously they've
Yeah,
listened.
yeah.
Yeah, we were almost to the point that it was 4 or 5, it was a fractional of 4 full-time equivalents in overtime, which in a staff of 12 is insane.
Mhm.
Last year, our full-time equivalent number was down to, I believe, 1.4, which is much more reasonable. So it is a problem that seems to be correcting itself. However, diligence of senior staff will be required to keep that number in check. Other numbers I will point out is I'll point out loan repayments. So as part of the capital budget, we had a front end loader and a pickup truck that were financed through the Municipal Finance Authority. So those loan repayments are put into the budget. After 5 years, they will drop off. So that's included in the budget this year. Other than that, most of the categories, actually all the categories except for those two, are increased by the inflationary multiplier. Any questions on public works? Airport, pretty simple budget. There's very, very little that is supplemented in this department through user fees. We do lease a couple of lodgings for aircraft on a monthly fee. Other than that, and there's also, we do collect user fees for the sale of gasoline.
So the building that's there, the one that Weather Canada uses, is that our building or is that their building?
It is owned by the federal government. It's not technically our building.
Is it our land?
It's technically not our land.
It's not our land either.
I believe that's where it was included when the airport was downloaded to us.
So that's a separate lot.
Yeah, it is owned by the government of Canada. I've checked.
That's too bad.
Capital, we're still waiting for resolution of our airport project. We put another grant for it. So if that's included, the capital funding will be largely supplemented by the provincial government. But our budget shows as shown, it's not a large budget. We usually spend less than $40,000 a year on our airport. Any further questions? That does vary quite a bit because the cost of fuel here listed is $8,000, but that varies fairly wildly. If we get into a good wildfire season, the emergency spending on that increases enormously and is reconciled accordingly. That's also $8,000.
No, that's our expenses. That's what we bought.
Yeah, these are.
We don't want you to know what we made. Just then you know our profit.
Our profit margin isn't bad on fuel. It's about 20%.
That's not bad.
Any other questions on airport? Okay. Moving right along, waste management. So, waste management, largely funded through, 3 different sources. We directly bill, landfill tipping fees. We do get a, operational grant for the regional district. And the rest is subsidized through municipal taxation. Our landfill does operate a loss, so it does have to be supplemented through a resolution of council. We implemented a segregation of the taxes. We now have a general rate, and there's a solid waste levy that's on the tax notices to show how much of the general taxation is being directed to waste management within the town of Princeton.
So, James, so this is always a point of contention with a lot of the residents, is the landfill. If we were to go strictly as some municipalities have, and that's a fee for service on there, the fees to access the landfill would almost go about 10 times.
It's difficult. It's a difficult measure to make because it's been shown in many other municipalities that the larger the landfill rate doesn't necessarily equate to the same amount in revenue. If we double the fees of the landfill, it won't necessarily double the amount of revenue.
People are just illegally dump.
Illegal dumping may be an issue. Landfills within the regional district may be used more. Landfills in Merritt or the coast may be used more. It's an easy one. If it were strictly based on the numbers, our tipping fees are approximately $300,000, and our offset is approximately $300,000. So if we doubled our rates, theoretically, it would cover our shortfall.
So this is the best system that we can come up with, the most fair system that we can come up with for the situation that we have here. Because I mean, who's going to pay a double what they're going to pay now? And really, with the fees that drop off.
Yeah, there are always improvements, and a couple of improvements have been suggested by staff, and we'll continue to bring improvements to the fee structure to council to. Even if we doubled them, it still would be less than what Metro Vancouver charges. We do $110 a ton. The last time I checked, Metro Vancouver was $275 a ton. However, they also have a very significant illegal dumping problem in the coast. So
the hybrid model is the best to go with right now.
Yeah, it becomes difficult to make those kind of comparisons. I think we do strike a pretty good balance between making sure that users pay for user services and at the same time providing good value to the tax.
Were the scales fixed on that?
Yes, the scales are operational. It is in the capital plan to get a different scale that would better automate the process and make it easier and hopefully cheaper for the landfill operator to operate down there. But I believe that's a 24 project, and it's a good candidate you can push forward because it's not really a necessarily a requirement, but it's more of a nice to have sometimes.
Well, if we're losing revenues, then we need to make sure we're not revenues. Brings your taxes down. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on waste management? Cemetery. So source of funds for cemetery, sales of service. Most of the time, with the exception of maintenance, the rest of anything else that went under cemetery would be covered by user fees. So any material we have to buy, so burial site prep, liners, memorials, things of that nature are all covered with user fees. The actual maintenance of the cemetery is covered by municipal taxation annually. Just maintaining the grounds.
So here's a question for staff. So Do we have a plan to expand or find another cemetery? Because it is filling up. And we have more and more people from the lower mainland coming up here to buy because we're cheaper, which is something I'd like to bring up as well, is that our fees are for out-of-town people are quite a bit lower than everywhere else, and that's why they're shopping around and coming here. Like, do we have a contingency plan or a long-term plan to deal with that, I guess, almost infill, I guess you'd say, at our cemetery? Because I know, like, where our family's plots are, there's people popping up that aren't from around here, right? But they're shopping around and they're looking for cheaper burial plots. So, which concerns me as a resident. And so, what are we going to do long term on that? Like, do we have a plan for that? Do we have a financial plan to deal with that?
Indications that I've gotten from our staff is that there's still quite a bit of room left there, but it's a good idea to a strategic plan around that, because at some point, there is one area that has some older sites that we're not 100% sure of that we need to verify, which is an expensive process, but
I think there's 2 spots. Right?
Yeah.
Up in the top corner and the other.
yeah, but there's no immediate need, but long term, we should be looking at long term plans.
And James, what about raising rates for those that are not connected to this area? Like, is that, I know we have an out of town and a resident.
They are already significantly more expensive than a resident rate. I believe they're 5 times more expensive. I believe the resident pays $475 and a non-resident pays almost $2,500. When I first got here, that was one of the first changes we made to the fees and charges, were to increase substantially the rate for on-cameras to head off exactly what you're talking about. It can be a discussion during fees and charges again if we want to adjust that number up again.
I think it'd be good to know what everybody else is charging around us and see if we're in step, because it is a concern, and I've heard it from other people too, that there's a lot of people from out of town shopping around, and I've heard it from other communities as well, where they're concerned about the amount of people that are not connected to an area coming and looking, and the price of real estate these days, you don't want to be buying real estate that you don't have to buy, right?
Yeah, what is it what's the charge in Chilliwack or
Yeah.
I wrote that down, yeah.
There's two directions the council could go with this issue. Either increase out-of-town rates substantially or restrict out-of-town people from buying. So you keep that in mind that, as with any service, we don't allow people from the lower mainland to come up here, hook to a hydrant and pour water without permission. We could also restrict out-of-towners from buying plots of land in our cemetery without permission.
So I guess I'm going to ask you then, when you come back with fees and charges, can you give us some options on what's happening around us and give us some different ways of looking at this? Because I'm concerned about it. I know there's people in the community concerned about it. In conversations in Penticton and other places, they're concerned about the same thing as well. And we don't want to be buying prime land to.
It'd be interesting to know. Do we have 10 years left? Do we have 2 years left?
Yeah, we'll do a little study on that. Yeah.
It's a little bit of a larger problem than just giving a number and saying we recommend that you just increase it to this number to defer people. It really should be more of a conversation around how do we restrict people if we're that concerned about it? Is there a permitting process we need to be able to bury at the landfill there's a Freudian slip.
There's the front page of the picture there.
Exactly.
If you go to like Granite, you have to have a family
That's right.
relation to that area. So,
Correct.
I'm not saying that. I mean, there's people that have come and gone, and maybe this is where they want to, be laid to rest. But I mean, I think we have to have some options, because I think this is going to become a concern, and especially as let's be honest. I mean, we're heading into a period of time where we're gonna see more and more people looking for, plots, and we need to, I think, have a plan in place to deal with that. And like I said, we're not the only ones that are talking about this. I've had conversations at a number of different tables across the interior, and they're concerned as well, so. We should just I'm just asking if you can bring us back with some options.
Absolutely. Any questions about the cemetery or structure? All right, Parks and Recreation. So source of funds, we received a cost sharing arrangement through the regional district. There are a small amount of user fees we charge for the arena, the pool, and some town rent that we collect from user groups. Not so much nowadays. Riverside Center was decommissioned as a town property in May, so the town rent is largely evaporated with that dissolving of that agreement. Capital budget, taxation, regional district. We have a grant through the federal infrastructure program to put a new roof on the arena with an electronic ice resurfacer. I won't call it a Zamboni, I won't call it Olympia. It is a ice resurfacing machine.
Will we have that next season?
It sounds like delivery is in November. Yeah.
And, an ice edging machine and solar panels to offset our carbon footprint on the arena.
Do we have money in for the pool? The pool we have? There was a couple concerns brought up last summer about the maintenance and some of the deck and.
There's a capital item for that. So, again, a large number of line items within the pool. There's the pie chart. Again, I will kind of point out any of the changes. We've had, we now have 3 different line items on the recreational budget. Before we had 1. We have the posse at $15,000. We have Halloween Family Fun Night for $5,000. Perennial applicants for the Grant and Aid program. That it doesn't really fit within the Grant and Aid program as it's more deemed for startups and not deemed for ongoing funding. So council decided to move that into a line item. And also the Arts Council is within the recreational budget. Also not another perennial applicant for the Grant and Aid program. They're now just receiving a line item, so an invoice every year will trigger that funding automatically.
So you have Riverside lease in there. Is that,
So that's
with our anticipation to get out of there?
correct. That's with our closeout of use of the Riverside Center within the first 2 quarters of the year. Other than that, everything else is an inflationary adjustment. And any other questions to the recreation budget? Move on to water. Water source of funds operationally or utility billing. Indirectly to this budget, we'll notice now that there is a loan repayment section. That is relating to the loan authorization bylaw last year, which passed through an AAP process. The repayments are put in under the operational budget. Their capital levy as was decided by council through the budget process. So there's utility billing with that one exception for loan repayment. There is no major changes to this budget. Some of the general labor is increased by a little bit more than the 7% inflationary factor due to the fact that we have the extra full-time equivalent, and the labor budgets for water and sewer are also tied into the the public works budget. It's all the same employees. So when there's an increase, there's also an increase for the water budget. Any questions on the water expenses for the year?
All commercials on meter now, right?
Yes, there are a few exceptions, and the staff are taking steps to get everyone in compliance.
Why are the exceptions, just because?
We still have a couple of commercial users that have not done one. Sewer, source of funds, utility billing, we do get some infrastructure grants. There are some insurance grants for sewer. We did have some sewer pipes that were wiped out in the flood in 21, so there's also some grants that will be forthcoming from disaster financial assistance to get some of those pipes rebuilt. Some of the source of funds will be borrowing, fulfilling that $7 million project on the capital side of things. So several different sources of funds for sewer, but for operationally speaking, it matches the exact same as the water. So utility billing for all the operational, and then we have a loan repayment budget that will be funded through the capital levy that council decided to go forward with during the budget deliberations.
And where are we at on DFA? Are they paying up yet, or?
We still haven't had any money. We've had a couple of discussions with their management, asking a couple of projects. Jared's following up with them, but we're still.
First roughly, what, 16.2 million that they?
Roughly of the recovery plan, yeah. For the actual recovery itself, I believe we received less than $100,000.
That's all we received.
We are working our way through it. Part of the 11.9 million was allowed to be used to supplement that money, so we can put us in a negative cash position. So once the funding does come in, it will replenish the 11.9 million we received from the province for flood recovery, and then those projects can proceed in source of the funds. So it doesn't put the town into financial peril, but we are waiting for the catch up so we can proceed with a couple of important capital projects.
Pretty bad. This is why communities don't get repaired.
Any other questions about the sewer operational budget? Again, other than the loan repayments, everything else is finished there. And again, the labor built within those budgets increases slightly because of the new full-time equivalent of public works. So this chart is the source of funds. So we're now moving into the revenue side of the budget. It's important to note that the largest portion of our budget is funded through federal and provincial grants. So if the entire capital plan is fulfilled, it equates to $27,387,000 in federal and provincial grants. So that includes 11.9 million. That includes DFA funding. That includes economic development grants, infrastructure grants, small community grants, all of the grants that would be payable from senior level of government. It equates to 60.3% of the budget this year. Municipal taxation represents 9.3%. Proceeds from borrowing, 12.1%. That would be the remaining portion, $7 million plan. If we were to pull it all off in 2023, the chances of that happening are very slim. So chances are that won't be spent in its entirety this year. Sales and services, 4.5%. Return on investments, 8.8%. So that's kind of the breakdown of those departments. This is an ideal situation where we fulfill the entire capital plan. For reference, in 2020, the last financial plan for 2022, we passed it with a very similar capital plan, $42 million, and we managed to process $6 million of it. So it's a very idealized version here. The chances of all these revenue sources being succeeded is relatively nil. But again, the way we design our capital plan is we put in all the ideas for capital spending within 2023, and a lot of them get deferred to future years because they just don't get done because we just don't have the time and resources to make it all happen. Important to note that if I remove the federal and provincial grants, the tax increase registers is 751%, over and above what municipal taxation would be now. So that's an important line to note because it the provincial government, number one, needs to be calculated when they do the budget, and number two, that federal and provincial grants are important to make sure that we keep our region affordable, our town affordable, and that staff really does do as much as we can to try and get as many grants as we can to keep the tax rates low. Any questions on revenue and sources of funds? Okay, so municipal taxation. So this year, the budget is calculated with a targeted tax increase of 9.97%. It follows the same doctrine of the last 5 financial plans, which is to account for inflation, and the inflationary increase, as I said before, this year was 6.7%. It also adds an extra 3% for supplementing reserves. It's important to note that the 9.97% increase is based on only the total tax revenues of the municipality. It excludes collections for school tax, police tax, BC assessment, municipal finance authority, Okanagan Regional Library, regional district, and hospital district levies. So those are completely out of our control. Municipal taxation only accounts for approximately 1 out of every 3 tax dollars collected by the municipality for use by the municipality. The largest amount that we collect is actually school tax. We collect approximately $1.5 million in school tax, approximately $200,000 in police tax. So that's the largest pools of financing we collect. So those amounts are completely out of my hands. They're completely out of the town's hands. The rates are given to us by the province annually. We process them and we put them on the tax bill.
So that's the amount of homes in town is 1435?
This year, yes. That's the amount of homes that have infrastructure on the north of $1,000.
So since
So
2017,
it excludes
27
vacant
homes.
It includes them.
So there's only 27 homes in the last 6 years?
That's 10 years of data, but yeah, it would essentially be 75 added folios in 10 years.
Yeah. So we get some more.
It doesn't include what's been removed. So, if you subdivide land, you remove 1 folio to add 10, or you remove 1 folio to add 2. So if you have a house that has an acre on it, you subdivide it to 2 half acres. You remove the acre, but you add the 2 half acres. Again, the cost of real estate in Princeton continues to increase substantially. BC Assessment published the increase in land value in Princeton is 16%. When it comes to occupied homes, that number is nearly 20%. So again, even with an inflationary increase of 9.97%, our mill rate again dropped 12 basis points to 2.41%, or $2.41 per $1,000 of assessed value. And the average value of a residential home with property on it in the town of Princeton is $399,912, which has more than doubled in 10 years. Any questions on municipal taxation at this point? continuing on with municipal taxation, the total tax base is estimated to increase by 11.8% over last year's budget. The amount represents a 9.97% tax increase and 1.85% contributed by non-market change. So non-market change is a comparison between what happened last year and what happens this year. So if you have a house, your valuation changes by market change. So you have a $200,000 house and now it's $250,000. We reduce the mill rate so that the average amount of a house is paying the same thing from year to year, and then add the increase after the fact. So just because your house increases by 20% in value, the taxes on average should only increase by the tax increase, which is 10%, or 9.97%. The non-market change represents an improvement that did not exist last year. So there is no house on it last year, you're only paying the land base. The improvement gets added. That amount does not get included in the base for calculating the tax increase. So it's essentially new funding that's coming online because the house didn't exist last year. And BC Assessment calls it non-market change. There's also, and it didn't really happen too much in Princeton in the last 5 years, but it can also happen from change in use. So if something is being used as a commercial property and then gets torn down and a residence gets put up, BC Assessment will also call it non-market change when that goes from commercial to residential use. It does happen a little bit in the industrial park. So bare land that has no commercial use is classified as class 6, which is a business use. If someone were to put a warehouse or a factory or some sort of use on it, it would shift out of business use and potentially into heavy light industrial use. That would also be considered non-market change. And the last point I'll make, which is new this year, is that the 9.97% increase does not include repayments of the loan authorization for Media Water and Sewer Works approved by AUB last year. So that amount represents an additional 12.76% amount over last year. And that was approved by the electorate in 2020.
And how is that going to show? Is it going to show as a parcel tax? Or?
That's going to be considered a capital levy. A parcel tax was proposed and ultimately council decided to count it as a property value tax. It's basically called a capital levy.
So it's only based on your value of your property?
Correct.
How
It'll show up in the tax rate bylaw when we pass that.
I wasn't here for that, so.
So property tax info, and this is for all the viewers at home again, online. BC Assessment notices were released back in January. It's based on an appeal process. So the appeal process is listed on the property value that comes from BC Assessment. The appeal process has come and gone. The appeal deadline is January. Hopefully we had some people that fought their assessment if they thought it was too high. It's all based on comparisons. They have professional property evaluators, obviously, who work at BC Assessment, who their job is to compare previous sales and fairly address property values. If a tax notice comes out and people notice it's abnormally high, the first thing I usually do is look at the assessment, and it's usually abnormally changed to the detriment of the homeowner. So anyone listening at home, the first thing I would do to make sure that your taxes are fair is to make sure your property valuation is fair. We do our best to help residents who need a little bit of help calling, but really it's just as easy as calling a phone number and talking to them. I'd say at least 65% of the time, getting the explanation of why it happened. Short of that, there is an appeal process. It's fairly informal, and it can just kind of up the ladder from there. Once the value of the property is set, it cannot easily be changed outside the appeal window. Claim the homeowner grant. I cannot stress enough that we still have people in this municipality that are eligible for the homeowner grant and do not apply for the homeowner grant. If you live in the home, with very few exceptions, the provincial government pays $770 or $1,045 of your taxes. If you do not claim the homeowner grant within 2 years, so homeowner grants that have not been claimed in 2021 are ineligible now, you lose it. So the province gives you 1 year grace, so you can apply for a 22 and a 23 homeowner grant. And they're very, very easy to do. Go online. Our administrative staff help countless people, especially those without access to a computer, help them apply for their homeowner grant online. So yeah, I can't stress enough. Apply for the homeowner grant. Deferrals. So the province has 2 deferral programs available. One for seniors over the age of 55, and the other one for families with children. There are some equity requirements to be had, but if you meet those equity requirements, you can apply to the province for property tax deferral, and it essentially is interest gets billed the same amount every year. It's not compounding. So right now, the seniors program, last time I checked, the interest rate was 1.49%. For families with children, it's 3.49%. So somebody who owes $2,000 in their property tax, the annual interest charge on that is, if I do my math correctly in my head, is about $30 a year, and it never goes up until you sell the house or until somebody else sells the house.
Or you can pay the loan.
You can't repay the loan anytime. But it literally never has to be paid back unless you sell the home. So we only have 9 regular users of the deferral program within the municipality, and they're all in the seniors program. So if you have difficulty paying property tax in a year, please call the finance department, and we will find a program to set you up, or make sure you claim that homeowner grant and get that bill as low as possible. Other sources of revenue, again, government grants, federal and provincial grants, largely in the form of conditional grants. So the reason I put that in is because I get the question every year during public consultation: why do you guys build statues and don't reduce my taxes instead? We have no latitude to take federal and provincial grants that are earmarked for capital projects and reduce taxes. Unconditional grants, we do receive a couple, which does supplement high rates of taxation. The province gives us every year a small community grant, which covers about 10 to 15% of the tax base of the municipality, and that's specifically used to reduce tax burden on taxpayers. But the province, it is illegal for us to take a government grant given for a certain purpose and use it for operational expenses. We have several direct operating grants, mostly from the RDOS, that are used to offset operational expenditures, where we have a significant portion of the service we provide also provides that same service to residents in the regional district. Sales of service, so we do user pay fees. There's a series of them. Paying for admission or rental of the arena, going to the landfill, when somebody rents out a town-owned property, user fees of the campground. We probably have 20 to 25 categories of sales of service. They're in the budget. I'll let you read them over. If there's any questions on categories, then I'm happy to answer the questions, but they have not changed this year, and investments, so we do get investment income, food excess revenue or reserves, interest from the town's operating bank account, penalties and interest from unpaid property tax. We receive amounts from investment in the Vermilion Community Forest Corporation. So there's a number of different avenues. Obviously, interest rates have been in the news quite a bit, and the fact that we have received quite a bit of funding for flood recovery and for government grants that have not been quite used yet. We've received a lot more interest than we have in previous years. I believe roughly in 2021 we received about $15,000 to $20,000 in interest. Last year was $384,000, significantly more. So investment is starting to become a major source of funding for the municipality at high interest rates. Lastly, we have other schedules that are in the financial plan. We will review the financial plan next. But we are required to display proposed reserve transfers in our financial plan. Those are listed in Schedule D. Often reserves will have transfers both in and out in the course of a year. Proposed transfers are almost never listed as actual transfers. There are capital projects that don't get fulfilled. We receive extra revenue, maybe in the form of a grant that doesn't get fulfilled in a year. There's many different reasons why reserves are not quite enough or too much. And so actual transfers are done by resolution, and obviously quarter 4 2021 is incorrect. That would be done in the first quarter or two of the next fiscal year in 2024. Proposed net transfer of expense of reserves in 2023 is planned to be $4.625 million. That's, of course, if we manage to fulfill the entire capital plan. So chances are it will be less than that. Schedule E of the financial plan is a permissive tax exemption policy. That's required by the community charter to be in our financial plan, so that's written in there. Actual permissive tax exemptions are published as part of the annual report due out by the municipality by June 30th. Last slide, Schedule F of the financial plan defines all reserves in use by the town as required by statute. That is new for this year. So it does say in the community charter that reserves shall be passed by bylaw. So the reserves are actually hallowed within the financial plan this year, which puts us on side of the community charter. Schedule G of the financial plan reports actual amounts of the 2021 budget. Enlisted in the financial plan, it says for certainty, the financial plan may be amended at any time. So that puts in the amendment into this current financial plan, so we no longer have to pass an actual financial plan amendment. It's a little bit of a housekeeping thing, but it will reduce our paperwork burden and reduce some confusion as to we pass the financial plan and immediately we repeal it because it's no longer in effect, passing numbers for the financial plan that from last year. So that's the overview of our budgetary process and our numbers for 2023. Are there any specific questions on the presentation, or before I kind of break into the bylaw and kind of show how those two interact? Okay, without further ado, I will put up the financial plan. How they fit.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, you bet.
So the 12% capital levy, is that on every single piece of property, including industry and commercial businesses in our community?
Yes, it does. It has to be by law. So let me just shift over to. I just have to get the financial
Does
close.
everybody want a quick walk around before we get into this, while he does this thing? Stretch. No. Not your option. Cookie.
The cookie is good.
Yeah, that's not bad.
There you go.
Oh, there we go.
So we're gonna take a quick.
You want to 5 minutes? Need a motion?
Sure.
I'll make a motion.
Travis, in a second. All in favor? Take a 5 minute break.
This is what happens when you take a breath.
So, while we're on the break, I looked up,
We're probably not,
huh?
we're not muted.
Oh, no.
I know you're not here on the 21st, are you?
No, I'll be back. I'll be fly back in a second.
Of course you are. I just sent you an email, I sent Carrie, Jared, it said disaster, there's only a few spots left open. Disaster Mitigation and Adaption Fund, webinar for potential applicants, so that's the federal program.
It'll be,
I'm gonna open this just for,
Yes, and Russia, yes, please do.
they'll have web
That's-
archive of it.
That is.
It's wiring.
that's
It's
last
from the
one
roof.
that's available.
got pulled down with some ice. It's also hanging
It's
over.
the first time I saw it, and all the other ones are full. This is the last English session.
Is that for the dikes?
So the February 28th, the March 9th, the March 14th, all four. So March 21st is the only one left open. So hopefully it can be signed up, so it's Tuesday. For the morning.
Yeah. So we can just register for free, I guess, huh?
Yeah,
Okay, I'm just gonna register now, and at least we got a spot.
yeah, I did the same.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like 10:30. It annoys me that the federal government doesn't send those out to communities, like, I just happened to look at an FCM update, and they're already all booked up. So lazy. Oh, that's nice, I got cold there.
Yeah, that is nice.
Coffee? I had one just before this.
That's a sign.
Oh, coffee's down there.
It's got nothing to do with your boring presentation.
You're using this as your public presentation.
Yes.
I knew it.
Yeah.
I
Yes,
knew
it
it.
has
I was
to-
gonna say something too, I was gonna say, James, jump ahead.
Those two birds, one stone, yeah.
It's all good.
Well, you know, it's gotta go on holidays.
Mm-hmm.
What a time. Take holidays in the middle of budget season.
Was it? That would not bad. Was it $10?
Wait, the audio is good.
Was the levy?
I was doing it again.
but 12%.
It sounded good on James's phone there, we could hear him.
And then 12% is covered by that, the following. I thought you just added up there.
Oh, I don't know. Added up.
Yeah, I don't know,
Very
man.
much tourism.
Yeah, you gotta take a chance.
Oh, that was good.
Didn't spill, it's wrong. There's lots of kale left.
Somebody said there was great stuff up there.
One cookie, 25 grams. God,
I can't eat it anyway.
I know.
Bring another coffee, eh? How do you eat caffeine?
This is insomnia class here.
It's fantastic. Fascinating. Wait until I get to the structures of statistical bias.
That's fine. You wanted to make sure I was with that.
I haven't even explained what systemic versus random error is.
Notice how bean counters are all the same.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with them, but they all have this own little language and mindset, right?
Yeah, but it's different sense of humor.
So
If you wanna call it
Yeah,
that.
I don't use that for us. Sorry.
Funny a lot, just trying to really funny one.
That's right. You weren't paying attention in the video.
Yeah, that's right. All apple, no apple. All apple, no
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad someone phoned my phone, because I was drifting off.
I'm up.
apple. Is
I asked them
Carrie,
to call again in 45 minutes.
is Carrie coming back, or is she ready for the hill?
Just give her notice.
That's right.
Yes, it was good.
It's not that bad, is it?
Like, how much longer are we waiting?
Another hour.
Another hour?
So we go down the bylaw.
And that's when we get to the good stuff, eh?
That's right.
Nice. I think we may need another cookie for that.
We get to figure out.
Yeah.
I just broke a little piece of habit. Oh my. Is that back to him?
I'm not sure.
Who's in there? The training one.
That's right, it said that.
Who's in there? Oh, Ed and Rob guys and Dave, they were in training there.
Oh. That Colmont, our department's looking today. You've been seeing pictures online? That was awesome.
Almost all of the donations.
Mm-hmm. Extremely awesome.
Okay. Okay, we're gonna call the meeting back to order. Carry on, James.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So carrying on, we'll actually break into the 5-year financial plan at this point. And I'm gonna zoom in as much as I can to make it as big as I can. Big screen. So, once we prepare our budgetary documents, the budget itself isn't the financial plan. This is the financial plan of which we carry on, and the province expects us to use to guide our financial affairs. So the schedule, the bylaw consists of 7 schedules, up from 5 last year. The bylaw is given a name, that's done on first reading. And once we pass this financial plan, we repeal the old financial plan. That's done by law. So that becomes relevant when we scroll down a little bit. Move on to page 2, which is our tax rate policy in 2019. It has not substantially changed since 2019. Essentially, our goal is to, for fairness, keep residential property tax rates competitive, not necessarily cheaper than everyone else, but competitive. And encourage reserves and to make Princeton an attractive municipality. We designed the tax rates based on that. And if there's any discrepancy by this policy, I'm required to report back to council with my recommendations to follow those three objectives.
What?
You take my pick.
Oh, here.
Schedule B, where we get into the meats and potatoes of
Don't make me gavel.
the financial plan. So, in 2022, we passed a similar looking bylaw, which listed rates from 2022 through 2027. If you look at the first page, if I back up again, the first page, we notice that the financial plan extends for 5 years. So this is the financial plan as proposed for the town of Princeton for 2023 through 2027. So if that requirement that a new financial plan didn't have to be passed annually, spending could be authorized under this bylaw until December 31st, 2027. So without a 5-year financial plan, if we had a 1-year financial plan, essentially at the end of the fiscal year, the municipality would no longer need to spend money. So no wages would be paid, no subcontract would be spent, all purchasing cards would be canceled, and all town financial activities would cease until a new financial plan was passed. That obviously does not happen. It would be very hard to recruit employees for one thing if we did that, but every service would be disrupted at that point. So we operate under the old financial plan until a new one is passed. And that's why we actually repeal the old financial plan as part of the new financial plan. So with that in mind, the financial plan for 2023 to 2027 is there. It is a consolidated financial plan, so it is not the same as the budget that is passed, the 13-page document plus the 2 pages of capital spending. The capital spending is done in Schedule C, but for the ease of purpose of operating the operational plan of the municipality, we just give general category guidelines within the financial plan. We don't want to hamstring people if we need more money into the snow clearing budget specifically, and we don't spend as much money in another public works function, maybe tree falling or something of that nature. It gives a relatively easy ability to shift amounts between line items in a budget. Ultimately, as required, the categories in this budget must be maintained. So no more than $45,000 can be spent in discretionary grants. No more than $1.965 billion can be spent in public works in the 2023 fiscal year. Those are rigid. The line items within the budgets are not. It's consolidated, so the categories are adjusted for sake of brevity on this page. The future amounts are readjusted, so we give some basic assumptions for each year. The assumptions are slightly increased, typically from year to year because of the consistency of the inflation rate for essentially the last 20 fiscal years. The assumption used to be 3%, which was basically 0 plus a 3% placed into reserves. For this year, 7 was decided. We're hoping that inflationary pressures decrease. They already have some indication they're starting to. The Bank of Canada is not expected to increase interest rates on Wednesday. because we're seeing some softening in inflation rates, and we're hoping that in the future, the inflation rate will return to a more historic level, and we'll be able to make this year kind of a one-year blip. That's the hope. Revenues, again, are decided based on two different procedures. Municipal taxation and things are calculated on an inflationary basis. But regional and or federal and provincial grants are largely based on the capital plan. So if we add a capital item, our revenue is assumed to offset it. For example, we have water pipes that are done through the $7 million plan. The assumption is that they'll be used to the proceeds of borrowing, and that's how they're identified in the financial plan on this schedule. If we do work with the $11.9 million or through DFA funding, through major works, those are put through as federal and provincial grants. So the operational and capital revenues are all put together. The expenses are based on cash expenditures and are listed there. So right now, as of the creation of this financial plan, when we go to third reading, we're proposing a $38.936 million capital budget. And the difference makes up the operational, approximately $8.5 million to get to the final expenses of $47,581,000. The net change in the reserve funds are listed below, which make up the shortfall in the difference between revenues and expenses to come out to a zero balance, which is required under the community charter to be a balanced budget. That number may look maybe not as rosy, the 2.174 that needs to come from different reserve funds. However, that's assuming the entire capital plan gets executed and all operational expenses get executed. Very rarely do those two ever come up. Last year we showed a deficit. This year we will show approximately a $4.5 million increase in revenues over expenses. So just because it's planned that way, it's very unlikely that that will need $2 million out of reserves. We're required to put planned sources of revenue and planned distribution of municipal taxation in our financial plan every year. So those are listed above. The source of revenue table is the same as we just went through in the PowerPoint presentation. Municipal tax revenue, government grants, direct operating grants, sales and service, proceeds and borrowing, and other are all included in that chart that was shown was slide 8 or 9 in the PowerPoint. But the planned distribution of municipal taxation is not. That's currently the amounts per class, which is also required in the community charter to display. 40.7% of property taxation approximately comes from residential. 30.1% comes from heavy industry. And 17% come from the business category or vacant land, but it's not residential. Also gets put in class 6 as we call business and other. So if it's business use, it's class 6. If it's vacant land that hasn't been given a class because it's vacant land and nobody's using it yet, it stays in class 6.
And those are provincial designations.
Those are BC assessment designations, that's correct, under the Assessment Act. Light industry, 8.7%. Utilities, 3.5%. It's important to note that utilities are capped at $40 of taxation per $1,000 of value, or 4% of the total value. That's done under community charter regulations. It is impossible to increase past 40.
Have we heard back from our inquiry about BC Hydro?
Yes, we have.
And
So the 1% utility tax under the Local Government Act is based on utilities encroaching upon municipal works, so on sidewalks and on over rivers, bridges and such. Basically power lines and utility infrastructure. When it comes to Copper Mountain Mine, their power lines come in through the regional district. So technically it does not apply because none of the structure of BC Hydro's utility lines comes to the town of Princeton. It all comes out of the regional district. That was the explanation given to me by the BC Assessment Board.
But wouldn't that be any different for the town of Princeton?
Well, it runs right into the town of Princeton because it's the mine. I don't seem to think that they have to give us anything.
It runs through the regional district.
It's not from the mine, it'd be direct from BC Utilities.
Yeah, but the mine is in, no, what I'm saying is the mine is in the town of Princeton. The mine is part of the town of Princeton. The power lines
lines are
go
all-
into the town of Princeton.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, they should be paying a tax to the town of Princeton. Right now, they pay nothing to us. Fortis pays that utility number, that's all Fortis.
It's
Well,
all
I did
Fortis.
question
Fortis,
that.
TELUS, and
Are they paying the RUS? Are they're paying the RUS on
Yes.
that part, because the regional district isn't taxed through the regional district, it's taxed to the province, then they don't have to pay the regional district.
it? You don't know.
They don't pay any commission.
Oh, here.
No, BC Hydro.
And that's not something that you could look into further, as the mayor's just saying. That,
I'll be discussing it with the ministers.
Might be a political thing.
because it's BC Hydro that would be paying that, it's not about the customer.
That's
No, it's not about the customer. And I've had a discussion with my management about this, and that's why we've looked into it, because it's a direct billing to the mine. Therefore, they should be paying into the town of Princeton as far as I'm concerned. I mean, just because they're out there doesn't mean they're not town of Princeton.
It's, from my understanding, it was based on the fact that power lines come in from the regional district and not from the town.
We can change that to the
So those are the breakdowns.
BC Hydro as a crown corporation.
Schedule C, capital expenditures and sources of funds. So capital items for 2023. We can review each capital item just to make sure that we have everything correct. I put these through every year. We are at north of 100 capital items, so I sometimes I don't exactly get everything right for the local council. So if you do notice something that needs to be changed, please let me know, and I can update it as we go along for third reading. So without further ado, we will review each line item. So land purchases. Object is to purchase land for municipal purposes. Source spending land sale reserve. The majority of that capital item is the purchase of the former Fortis BC Electrical Building on Bridge Street. There is another land purchase in there, however, that was discussed in an in-camera session, so I'm not at liberty to divulge other land purchase at this point. But that's where the budget sits at this point. Capital campground improvements was to install a new office and welcome center facilities at the municipal campground. We got a federal accessibility grant, $400,000, and the future amenity reserve was chosen because we had a $100,000 grant from the previous year, which was put into the future amenity reserve for lack of any other reserve to put it in at the point. So when we go to execute that capital project, the reserve, the $100,000 that was put into that reserve, would have to be out of that reserve. Bridge Street Park is to finish that project, shade sail and amphitheater. Federal Economic Development Grant. We had a couple of grants from a couple of NGOs, which has been allocated to that project, the funding of which has already been used under the previous financial plan. Princeton District Arena Improvement Project. we still have $967,000 in financial, reserve left to go on that. So the object is to replace the roof of the Princeton Arena, install solar panels on the roof of that arena that will generate electricity to power the building, reducing our carbon footprint. To acquire a new ice resurfacing machine. I'm very careful about that because we're very sensitive as to what that ice resurfacer is called. So I have learned my lesson, and we will remove any brand name start with Z, not Z, Z.
We buy Canadian around here.
Yes. We will just call it an ice resurfacing machine, an ice edging machine using electrical power. And to acquire and install new dehumidification machinery replacing the non-functioning units. So part of this project has already been done, and we're just waiting for install. So it will be completed in 2023, we hope. There's a number of sources of funding. There's a small amount of general taxation. There is, we're hoping for a contribution from the regional district because we do have a capital cost sharing agreement through our operational cost sharing agreement.
And you've already talked to them about this.
Yeah. We do have a federal infrastructure grant, and we have exhausted our arena reserve when we applied for the grant. We were required to pony up 10% of the cost for the cost of administering the grant itself, and that was paid when the grant was achieved. So we used the arena reserve for that funding. New vehicles and public works equipment. So we have that in there for the public works department. The source of funding is borrowing through the Municipal Finance Authority Equipment Purchasing Program. This has brought up some questions in the past from council. We choose to utilize this program. The interest rate is pretty good. It's usually within 0.25% above or below what we're receiving in interest at the given time. It provides a stable source of funding. It provides a stable direction to pay off public works vehicles. And ultimately, council still has to approve any purchase of vehicles or public works equipment through a purchasing policy, even though it's in the budget. Invariably, if it's going to be purchased as a capital asset, it's going to be over $20,000, and it has to be put to council as to whether the vehicle is required use. And if council thinks so, then we proceed with purchase. If not, then again it becomes another unfunded mandate, and it will either roll over into next year or fall off capital plan. Airport improvement project. So we received funding through the provincial government to put lights at our arena. At our airport. A little less prettiest up than the first one, but nonetheless still embarrassing. So we shifted that around to upgrade the fueling systems at the airport using that reserve funding and land sale reserve. We are waiting upon feedback from the provincial government before we proceed with that project.
I thought we got approval on
I think we're still
Yeah, we got approval to shift the first part, but we applied for a second grant. And I don't know.
okay.
Yeah.
waiting.
Oh, that's, I forgot.
Second bench hillside trail, and I see a typo, so I'll add a 0 in there. So that should be 100,000. And that's to rebuild the pathway connecting Fenchurch Avenue between the second and third bench residential areas. And it's a taxation project.
There's no way to do this cheaper, right?
It's tricky. It's a narrow, it's only the width of the road that we're dealing with there, you know, and to get it engineered to the point where it meets all the criteria it's quite difficult. And last year we tried, but we couldn't get anyone to even bid on it, you know, so.
So is there no way we can just discuss this with the neighborhood up there and just see if we can just do away with it? I mean, $100,000 for a set of stairs.
We're hoping that, you know, as we engage some help here, that maybe we can even make it into a bit of a trail, back to a zigzag trail or something simple, but likely, summertime use only.
Again, before we proceeded with a $100,000 capital project, we were going to council.
Yeah.
So even if it's there, it's conceptual at this point until we get approval from council to proceed.
The engineering of this stuff is just becoming ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like,
All to do with
it's
liability.
killing us.
Yeah.
New street lighting downtown, procure and install new street lighting in the downtown core. We have a federal transportation that active should be done. We have a federal, is that an economic development grant there, Gary?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so change that.
It's through the active
Well,
transportation.
no, yeah, sorry.
It's provincial.
Is it, it's
Yeah, it's
provincial?
Yeah. It's the active transportation.
Like, I'd rather take that 100,000 and buy a pair of garbage cans.
There is a cost sharing to go along with it, which would come out of the current year taxation.
So these lights will be brighter, but without the air, light pollution, correct?
Yep.
So we'll see people in crosswalks.
Yep. Should anyway.
That's a bonus.
Gary will do a report on it, but we're going from
Questions, jump in.
we're going from a level 1 to like a level 5, so that's the difference in brightness. So,
Go ahead.
The last report that we had at council was 270, so I'm just curious on that amount. Is it 270 or 280?
I believe it's 270. I think it was 65.
I don't know, I have it.
I thought it was the grant was 280 is what I
But
think.
their last report.
We were putting out a portion too. I'm not, it's.
Our portion was 65.
Yeah.
So the last report said 270 on February 28th.
So I would have to go double check it.
James, do you have it?
I do not.
I have it here. We received 215,600 according to the resolution,
And we were coming up.
and we were coming up with 65, which would put it
275.
Yeah. The grant covers 80% of the total project cost of $270,000, with the balance coming from the current budget to designate for streetlight replacement.
Obviously, we won't know the actual amount of expenditure until we look into a bid now. Then obviously something that would have to go in front of council, so again, at that point, we would figure out if the bid comes in too high, we have to go back to the drawing board. If it comes in significantly under that, then it should be fairly straightforward.
And this report was basically just letting you know that that the grant has been successful. So, yeah, like James said, it will come back.
Oh, understand. Gary, you might want to extend that a little. I'll try and hurry up. Trash can replacements, there's $17,000 allocated for very resistant garbage cans.
To remind one.
No. It was 7 or 8.
Did we put a claim in for the ones that were stolen, or we just eaten that?
I don't know.
There was a claim?
Yeah.
Okay. Because we had, what, 2 or 3 stolen?
Yeah.
Including the concrete pads?
Yeah.
Keep trying to move it, and it's screaming.
I know, I keep doing this.
Fire hydrant replacement, $20,000 to assist in replacing fire hydrants that no longer meet, fire code. Generator for the Ponderosa lift station, which was never completed last year. Funding for the sewer reserve. Storm system study, $1,000, for infrastructure grant funding. Find infrastructure deficiencies in the stormwater system in the downtown area. Industrial park water main loop. Install and procure water main loop within the industrial park. Purposes of providing water for the temporary housing project, and that's through the $11.9 million grant. Rockland Avenue and Highway 3, $50,000 to make safety improvements to that intersection. Banking system repair, $1.092 million. Very briefly double check. Don't know if that matches the capital amount that appears in the budget. Alarm bells are going off in there. One moment, please. Not that it's really relevant because banking would have to be approved by the province to fund it before we proceed with those works. It is listed as $2 million in the budget documents. Lori Curriway paving would be to pave that road. Land sales reserve would be used for that when we have sufficient amounts into the land sales reserve. Sanitary irrigation, $100,000. Procure and install an automated irrigation service. Done through land sales reserve again. Brown Bridge replacement study, $30,000. Conduct a study into the replacement options for the Brown Bridge. Beginning to be structurally deficient, so construct a plan and figure out how much that's going to cost so we can figure out how much to reserve for it in future years. SCADA expenditures, we had our SCADA system wiped out from our industrial park, from our public works yard during the flooding event, so that will be covered by insurance claim.
So have we gotten that approval from the insurance company?
Not technically, but they are responsible to cover it. It is part of the building infrastructure.
And it got hit by lightning after that. What was left over him got hit by lightning.
Yeah. Culverts and lift station, $685,000, paid for by the borrowed funds. As I understand, there may be possibly some DCCs that get put into that as well.
So we bought it this year? We're talking about years.
There we go. You okay with that there, Gary?
That's still changing.
There we go.
Yeah, it's listed in the DCCs as a project, and if we collect enough DCCs from some of the projects that are coming forward, then we'll be able to offset the cost.
The smoke machine, detects leaks within the sewer system. Was in there last year, it's carried forward budget for this year. Hull liquid waste pit, construction of a fourth waste pit at the Princeton Sewer Lagoons for $30,000. 100% funded by regional district, so if they don't want to proceed with it, they don't have to fund it, we don't do it.
Have they agreed to that
It was mentioned that they wanted it. It looks like Jared would better to speak on this than I would, but it looks like the volume of effluent is a little less than what they were anticipating, so it may not be needed. We kind of put the ball in their court. If there's sufficient need for it, then we can say we can build it or recap it based on what the environment ministry wants to go with. And then if they want to pay for building another one, they can. landfill scale software. So we've had a couple problems where the landfill scale has decided to kind of reset itself and corrupt some data, so that's to upgrade the scale software. It was in last year. It looks like the problem may have corrected itself. We're kind of waiting for more input. But, we did some things through our network infrastructure there to back up the information, which seems to be holding it a little bit better, but it's still there in case we need to move on. Park refurbishment upgrades. So it's to replace portions of parks that were destroyed in the flooding event, which we covered through DFA. Paving program. So it was decided, it was proposed by Public Works and ultimately agreed to by council that we would spend some of the paving program money this year to rebuild some sidewalks, as opposed to paving roads. Our roads are in fairly good shape, and the superintendent of Public Works suggested that we do a little sidewalk work instead. So that's where that's going. Federal gas tax funding is definitely able to be used for that purpose. And the paving reserve is also there because we do have some excess of funds that we collected gas tax last year that were not used that we do it this year. Memorial Park, $200,000 for the supplying of funding for the provision of pickleball courts at Memorial Park. Provisional on a grant received by the Pickleball Association.
Is this supposed to be somewhere above? Okay.
And we did receive a small grant from Weyerhaeuser to fund that project, so there is some deferred revenue available that we can apply to that when the grant gets approved.
To the Memorial Park?
Yeah. And that's where that's detailed in there. Park replacement vehicles. We've ordered the vehicles. They have not arrived yet. There's a pretty substantial backlog in vehicles at this point, so we're still waiting for a couple more. Those are all insurance proceeds. That $11.9 million grant, and if it goes to our exhausted, which it shouldn't be, the capital reserve probably on slack. But I don't think we have a problem with that last piece. Public shared replacement. So we are still waiting for Public Works shared replacement building. The architectural drawings, we're kind of waiting on a couple of minor adjustments, and then we can put that out to tender and get started on that. That's solely insurance proceeds because it was a building and our building insurance took that.
That's a goal.
Sorry, can you go back to the vehicle replacement?
Yes.
Sorry, was it changed to? Because you had on there insurance proceeds and grant funding.
Yeah.
And it was, before it was just emergency funding, so, okay, so you've got it on that now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So Public Works shared replacement is also to demolish the former community services building and the Public Works yard buildings in their original spots. Repairs to the Fenchurch lift station. So there's electrical components and land rebuilding that's still taking place around there. That'll be insurance proceeds in $11.9 million. And if there's anything that's ineligible under those two projects that you have a zero reserve fund backup on, again, I don't think that'll be required. Everything looks like it'll be covered through those first two sources of funds. Zero forest main lining. So as part of the resiliency portion of the provincial grant, we have lined the forest main from the Fenchurch lift station and sewer lagoons, which is paid through a provincial grant. But under the river crossing is done, I think we still have to do the line between the edge of the river and up the sewer lagoons, if I can recall correctly. Either way, it'll be a 2023 expense because it was done in the first part of this year. Sewer truck main replacement. Again, part of the $7 million plan is to replace the old sewer pipes underneath downtown. Part of the $7 million plan. Well 5 construction, design and build a new well, and provide for the disinfection of the water drawn from that well, and connect the well to the water system. Part of the $7 million plan.
Are we still doing that, or are we gonna hold on until we have?
Yeah, we'll put it in here for now, and then, but we are waiting for a little bit of design and approval and whatever that process to go through, so.
We still have heat tones and stuff, so.
No, that's not the problem.
Yeah.
Sure, health isn't improving anything right now.
Yeah,
And
I think Jared is a little bit more optimistic now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Booster station construction at Warner Builder. That project is proceeding along fairly well. Excuse me. The project is expected to be done in Q2 this year, so the corner one would finish the project off, and $7 million project is for that. The infrastructure master plan was also part of the $7 million plan. I haven't heard a lot of moving forward on that, but it's definitely in that plan, so probably something the engineers start working on additionally. I think we're at this point.
I think it's already underway, they're just
Yeah.
as they go.
National Avenue Sewer Lift Station. So with the additional capacity on the sewer trunk line from replacing the old pieces and with the depths that we need to hit the river, it's been identified that we need a new sewer lift station on the north side of the Tualatin River. Of course, the grades that they have to build at nowadays, as compared to the old grades they did, are insufficient for gravity treatment to Dunchurch. Decommissioning of wells 1 and 2 and replacement facilities. So we all know that that's the portion of the town's under the Boil Water Advisory, and that's to bring the water up to interior health standards so we can certify the entire town again out in water.
Question on that one. So on the capital plan, it's at 4,570,000, and you have it at 4.
The 4.5 from the province. So.
I'm just,
If it was at 4,
we have spent some
that's
money.
30,000.
We have spent some money on it, so. Yeah, so that should be 4.5, thank you. Correct that. Go. Again, fully funded through the $11.9 million from top. Roof replacement for the, sorry?
I do have concerns over the price on that, because it keeps getting pushed and pushed and pushed, and worried that it's not going to be enough though.
And
Yeah, go ahead.
the last report had, is it supposed to be, oh, you fixed it. You keep reading it. Because it was, you had, fire department reserve.
Oh, for the wells?
Yeah, for the roof. So,
Oh,
so is it 66.6 current in taxation or reserve?
at this point, it's taxation for 2/3 and 1/3 through the shared service grant through the English.
Unless you change this.
I think you're referring to the exhaust system, which was
It was off of this, fire hall roof replacement. Now this is, you've got this, you got your capital change now too.
Any other questions on the fire hall roof? The fire chief is hopeful that we'll get the quote in the next couple of weeks and we can start proceeding on that. We'll see kind of where that lands. Age appropriate planning? Age appropriate planning plan, that doesn't sound right. Or age appropriate plan?
It's age friendly,
Age friendly?
yes. Assessment and plan.
Assessment.
That was a grant.
Alright. So that is funded through the UBCM, $65,000, and it's just to adapt planning strategies using age appropriate. The best signature ever written. Road bridge taking and repairs, $250,000. That was identified by Jim during the budgeting process. Put under land sales reserve. This gives us a source of funding for it. $250,000 is a big pill to swallow for the fixation source of funds. So that's not water, that would be public works.
And we would do the assessment first, right?
Yeah.
And assessment.
Mm-hmm. Revenue housing.
Statues again. So procure and install some statues identified as a strategic during strategic planning as something the town would support.
They're on grant, James.
Is it?
Yeah,
What grant is it?
destination development grant.
Okay. Still federal?
Not, provincial.
Okay.
James, on your, capital, it has it from land sales. If I'm reading it across, right? So 50,000 from land sale reserve and 150 from infrastructure.
Is that a cost sharing grant?
No, we were, actually with that destination development grant.
Yeah.
And the other was, I think, not from land sales.
Okay. So. Okay, does that look better? Can I do that? Mosaic facility. Design and construct a theater and multi-purpose facility using the strategic investment fund of the federal gas tax funding. That was something that was kind of done and announced the UBC municipalities with a very limited time frame. We put in a design of a building very quickly. I think we did 2 days.
Yep.
And put it in, and we still haven't heard anything about it yet. But,
It's 100% funded.
it's 100% funded, yeah. So if we have that, we'll have a brand new theater and multi-purpose facility downtown. Fingers crossed.
Do we know when the,
No, we thought we would have heard.
It's part of the expiring agreement in March of 2024. So
We should find it pretty soon.
we should find out pretty soon because we still have to build it before March of 2024.
If you don't build it by the time it's our start, it's not even.
no pressure?
That's why they dropped it so fast, because they were hoping for shelf-ready projects.
Remainder of the OCP. During your taxation. Well 4 replacement. Relocate and reconstruct the well 4 at Tillman River, which will be provided through future grant funding from the provincial government.
And then, again, your capital plan just have a different amount. 6.5, that's what's worked on, so 6,498.
6498. That's that. Okay. Okay, Chilling River Crossing at the Riverside Center. 2.151 million, and that's to repair the sewer crossing. And we've applied through disaster financial assistance. And I believe we're also applying through a federal infrastructure grant for that as well.
Have we heard anything from them on that one?
Not yet.
Can you just send pictures of it?
We're working with that one now. Trying a couple of different things.
There was just a question on that, but he moved it on the line. It's dark in here. So just on the funding sources, on your capital report, you have 151,000 from borrowing.
I think that's a different river crossing.
For side 2 Main River Crossing?
Yeah, because I think if it goes to infrastructure funding,
Oh, we have to put a percentage.
it's a cost share, yeah. It's not, I think it's like 5%.
Which is fine, we just have to say our source.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't see it.
This is all from.
You look at it?
Other side.
Are we gonna get that?
It's changed.
Okay. Recreation master plan, $80,000 a month through sewer, it's called Parks and Recreation.
Thank you.
So develop an overall town operating capital plan for the Parks and Recreation Department. Visitor Center, virtual reality room.
Road grants again, it's a destination development grant.
Sorry, that's you guys.
For $75.
I had to.
So procure and install a virtual reality-based attraction with Esther the Town Principal, the Visitor Center. Campground capital improvements, I think that's a duplicate.
No, they're actually two separate ones,
Really?
James. The first one was destination development grant for the existing building.
Okay,
Should have been, it was 100 and 100.
Yeah.
This is the big one we got. This was the big grant.
There's a third
There's a
one
third
There's
one.
a third.
There's another one.
on the second to last page for 570.
those are
That's
the,
the big one.
I think this, it's got the same description.
yeah, but it's a duplicate.
So it's, you have the wrong grant for the other one.
Yeah. Pool boiler and cover, $18,000
Is that
to
enough
procure,
for
install a new boiler and new pool cover. Yeah, Pete's already got the quote.
Pete did
Oh, okay.
did work on this.
Didn't even say a lot, right? So, yeah, that's good. Should get rid of the complaints about the cold.
That should be zoning by law, not this. 120,000 to upgrade the town zoning bylaw, so family taxation. CCTV inspection, $63,000 to inspect the condition of the town sewer system. We are applying for a grant for that and the difference between the sewer reserve.
I hope you get that.
Okay, campground washroom upgrades 570, you said that the source funding is incorrect?
On the first one.
That was the first one.
Okay, this one's correct.
This is the big one, yeah. And we're not demolishing.
We're not demolishing it?
Shall we just fix?
We're constructing. Hear that, Gary?
Yeah, that number is a little. I think you might have Under from the
There was this. Let me just pass it. Yeah, you pass it.
I would just like them to.
Wow.
Yeah, I honestly can't do that.
That's why I'm starting to.
Yeah, we can pass that later.
Yeah. So it's 900 total, 750 various projects. And that scope has changed a little bit because of the time frame that's spent by the end of March, so that was on a time.
Of this year?
Does that include the downtown improvements as well?
Yeah, downtown improvements is on there, there's a few other things. that are on
Okay,
there.
so I'm gonna eliminate this one for now, because I already have the 900 later on.
It's all under that.
All right, Urban Wildlife and Deer Select Committee, 25,000, create a plan to manage wildlife within town boundaries. Aquatic Center Plan, 15,000, so different options for indoor aquatic center for the town.
Tell anybody to do that yet?
I did reach out to a couple. One guy's retired, one guy is retiring, but he gave me another guy who's willing to work with us, and so we've got the ball started, so. Just initial discussions.
Okay. Aquatic Center Plan, yeah, so we have that. Airport lighting project, there's that $2 million for design, supply, and install runway lighting at the Princeton Airport, 90% federal grant, and percent for your taxation. Did I get that one right
You
here?
got that one right.
Thank goodness.
Yeah.
All right.
So is there any way we can talk to the health authority or whatever about that too? Because then we can mind.
We have letters of support from them already.
Do it, okay. Be nice to have our air evacuation done.
It's in, we've got that in there.
Water meter reader, 25,000. The water department is having difficulty getting accurate readings of the meter with the current one they have, so this one is truck mounted and it will read it with much more accuracy.
Is it 5G?
No idea. I'll put tinfoil around it. The process through the water reserve. We did have a couple of projects that got added on since the passing of the financial plan in December. So that's these three. So a new water truck for the PXA, $50,000. There was a unrestricted donation that was received from somebody in the community, and we decided to put it towards that use.
So because of that, we're going to, I've talked to Carrie and we're going to come up with a policy on private grants and that want to be earmarked to organizations in the community. Other communities have it. We haven't received a lot of private grants in the past to go to organizations, so this way we can deal with that appropriately.
It's an issue we haven't usually had in the town of Princeton, but we are now, so. Downtown beautification, 900,000, so that's where the new washroom building and infrastructure upgrades, the sidewalks within the downtown core and the Princeton Visitor Center. Federal Economic Development Grant funding and non-sales reserve, is that correct? All right.
Yes.
And it's even correct on here.
That's something, right?
Is that something you're still applying?
No, we got it. This is what we gotta spend by the end of March.
And, yeah.
I've got it spent.
And just today, actually, we were asked from Jared, large format scanner, $12,000 to procure a large format scanner to input large size paper documents from public works. Infrastructure building administration.
to be able to scan building plans?
Yes.
Nice. Is there a possibility of getting that as a plotter as well, so we can,
Oh, I asked about that. It jacks up the price to like 15,000.
15,000?
Yeah, 250. No, like an extra 50.
Yeah, next week.
I'm like $3,000 do it.
Oh, $3,000, I'd agree with you. Yeah.
That's too bad.
Yeah.
But that's great, so we can
But it's-
digitize everything.
Yeah.
Nice,
So, yeah.
that's awesome. Okay.
So that's the Schedule C for the capital items. Is there any questions?
Yes,
All
there's
right.
some things missing.
Okay.
Our fire truck, it's on our capital paper, but it's not in your Schedule C.
Okay. Yes, we did. Did we move that to 23?
Yes, but
Yes,
that's,
we
we
did. It's on your
have
capital
to order and put it
as
on paper down the
23.
street. There's a 4 to 5 year turnaround on it, so we have to.
Yeah, you've got 400,000 in for this year.
I do.
It's just not on Schedule C.
All right. Just enough to add.
And it should come after Bridge Street.
And that's coming from, well, we're taking the right from mine.
That's coming from.
Yeah.
Well, we put the.
Well, on here you have
We
this
put the
taxation.
mine taxation into reserve, and then from reserve it goes into.
Okay, fair enough. I'll read it, yeah.
That's just the deposit too, isn't it?
Yeah. We will actually take ownership for 4 or 5 years after the.
And is that a ladder truck or just,
That's just a normal truck, it'll be about $1 million. By the time it's all said and done.
Okay.
we're not getting a ladder truck?
Next year.
If we don't order this truck now, we will not be accredited. We won't have our underwriters anymore.
We'll look for a used ladder truck.
So this is the problem with fire
Okay,
trucks.
and then, in the arena, just a housekeeping on that was, the items that, on the capital said, like roof and solar panels, total 629, ice resurfacer, edger, 177, dehumidifier, 80. And then it said arena, 142, it's not. Which part of that is that?
So the only thing we have spent in 2022 on that project is the administration fee for the grant.
Which isn't 142.
No, it's 61. You can see the completed portion?
Yeah.
142 minus 61 is 81.
Yeah, so what's the difference? Is that just like general arena upgrade?
It's probably for the unifier, roof, solar panels, ice resurfacer, major, and then arena. It's probably a combination of any of those projects. It's just to balance out
The grant.
the source of funds.
Okay, and then, the visitor center roof is on
Yes, that was added last time.
capital budget, but it's not in your Schedule C.
That was
We're
added
doing that
last
this year.
year.
We better, or we're gonna have, we got water pouring in on the electrical panel, so.
Oh, geez. I thought that was a fairly new roof.
It would be after the Memorial Park.
Sorry.
Where are we taking money for that, buddy?
It's under taxation.
What is this coming to? I can't let our buildings fall down.
No.
We used to do that, just let everything leak.
Didn't
Now we
work
have
out.
$1 million repair bill.
What's that?
Building
It's it this year.
I'm sorry, where did you say that? Oh,
After
one, then you can bring vehicles around it.
Nobody's in it, so.
You can move it. And The rest were answered as we went along.
Okay, that's it. We'll jump into the next section, please, James.
All right, second there, I'll add that.
3 hours and just go 5 minutes. We still have 2 more.
After or before?
Yeah, after. And before vehicle replacements flood.
You guys are having too much fun.
He's pretending to laugh as I show him old reports and stuff.
He's like, oh my God. James's budget, your reports. I could be watching on.
I'm just clear.
All right, so I'll just,
I have to go get up and down to go, so.
I'll quickly review the rest of the financial plan. That's always the longest part is the capital. But, Schedule D is, proposed reserve transfers, adjustments, and non-cash transactions. Previously in the past, we didn't do the schedule, and then our budget numbers would be very much out of whack when it came to our budget numbers on our financial reports. So this and schedule, the next page, should correct for those numbers so that when they go and make the financial statements in May, they make a lot more sense when it comes to the budgetary numbers. All our budget numbers are done in cash, and obviously the financial statements are accrual-based, so it adjusts the two accordingly. Schedule E is our tax exempt, or is our place of tax exemption policy. Hasn't changed. I think the last time we did it was 2021?
Yeah, it's pretty new.
That's where that sits. Schedule F is the enabling of reserve funds. So it adopts the reserves by bylaw. I'll quickly review them because it is new, so council should be aware of how the reserves are planning to be structured. So we have 2 types of reserves in the town of Princeton according to this reserve fund bylaw: cash-based reserves and non-cash-based reserves. So cash-based reserves will be reserves basically when the sum of funds is aggregated. So that's kind of a oxymoron there because an aggregate is a sum of funds, but it basically should add up to the amount of cash and cash equivalents that the town holds at a given time. So that will give us a very good, accurate measurement on how much money we have in reserves and how much money we have left for operational expenses. Non-cash-based reserves are accounts that are required in financial statements to arrive at the requirements generally accepted accounting principles. So specifically, deferred revenue is not a reserve; it is held as a liability. So we have to have some reserves in there that are on cash-based to be able to balance everything to meet the requirements of Canadian accounting standards.
Can I ask a question? The development cost charges are supposed to be broken out into their different park, sewer, water. Are you not showing that?
Under Canadian accounting standards, development cost charges are listed as a deferred revenue, not listed as a reserve. Our auditor corrected me on that during the field survey and required me to remove it out of reserve.
Oh, okay.
So I had them originally all described nicely in the reserve bylaw.
Well, that's what I thought it said, that they had to go into separate reserves.
Wasn't allowed to be reserves.
You just have to report on the
I have
ins
to
and
report on
outs.
them. Yeah, I have to report on the ins and outs and everything else, but under accounting standards, not considered a reserve.
So this will clean up all of the mess that we
That's right.
inherited.
And yes,
So this puts us,
be much easier to
Where we're supposed to be.
report to council on the status of reserves.
okay,
So I'll quickly, a lot of these are just rehash of what we've already had. It just lays out the enabling wording so that we meet all the requirements of the community charter. So parkland reserve, land sales reserve, landfill closure reserve, water system reserve, sewer system reserve, future venue reserve, fire hall equipment reserve, KXA grants reserve, marina reserve, road paving reserve, infrastructure reserve, capital equipment reserve, cemetery care fund reserve are all reserves that have existed already in the past. And it just labels it in a bylaw so that we meet all the requirements of the new charter. Cemetery care fund reserve is done with the Cemetery Act. All these other ones are done with the community charter. Deferred revenue reserve, so that will give council the amount of money that is included in the deferred revenue. A consolidated cash reserve. So when we add up the amount of our bank account and we subtract off all the amounts of the capital or an operational reserve, the consolidated cash reserve will be whatever is left over. So we know how much we have in operating reserves in general for the operations of the municipality. And I can report on that because it's enabled. Long-term loan reserve, that's non-cash based. So that's essentially what liabilities we have that's over and above the current year. So that way we know what the liabilities are currently. Deferred revenue offset reserve. So if we count deferred revenues as a cash reserve, because we should have deferred revenues in cash, offset of that is non-cash. It just makes sure that our deferred revenues are a liability and not an equity account, which would be not allowed under Canadian accounting rules. Investment in capital assets, so that's an unrestricted surplus are defined in Canadian accounting standards. Those are what we've had in previous years, but it just kind of plays out total amount of tangible assets and anything that's left over from cash accounts and non-cash accounts minus what we have totally in equity. It lays that out, and then in Schedule G, again, for certainty, it basically reconciles the previous financial plan so that the actual amounts are transferred over in their entirety, which is, again, another requirement of the community charter. And that is the financial plan. Again, if council has any questions, feel free to voice them now or have a look over it, and we'll keep the public consultation open until we get to third reading in April. Also, if the public is watching this, feel free to comment on the financial plan and provide input right up until the 29th of March, and then we can proceed with third reading and first council meeting in April if there are no major changes. So thank you, Mayor Quinn, for allowing me to speak on the budget. I know it went fairly long, but now I think we have everything. Is there any questions on anything that we haven't addressed?
Good. Okay. And I want to say, if there's anybody listening, the secret word of the day is alligator. And if you can tell me that word, then I can finish this whole series. 3 hours and 12 minutes. Thanks, James. That was a lot to digest. Move right quick into the next one, which will be 11.1. It's a letter that we received from Tara Maynard, the Literacy Outreach Coordinator. She wants to apply for a $15,000 Canada Post grant to build a, what do they call it? A little free library down by the town square. She has a very quick turnaround, so it happened, she came in at about 3 o'clock this afternoon. I said, well, there's a letter name, we might be able to get you in there. So, yeah, she was working with Carrie, and it's going to be very similar, like a stump type thing. She found an Indigenous artist down, was it Mission?
Yeah.
On a weekend, who said he would be interested in working with her to do this. And so what she's looking for right now is where is it? Letter support, and that we would provide the space and then, electricity they want to put a heated pad in there so that and the light, so that the books don't, float and stuff. And then possibly some, I don't know if it's in here or not, possibly some in-kind labor costs. So just to help put it in and do that kind of stuff. She's gonna look for grants or donation for the concrete and everything. So if council has any questions, ask away.
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Councillor, I think you said it, but he raised his hand, so I'm gonna give it to Elliot Willis.
And I'd like to say alligator.
And if anybody, last questions, all in favor? Carried, thank you. We will get that out to her ASAP.
Perfect.
And then with that, a motion to close, so we can, 1 second, talk about, looking for it, here we go. Motion to close as to section 90.1 of the community charter, subsection E, acquisition, disposition, or expropriation of land and improvements. If the council considers that disclosure could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the municipality.
Make that motion, Mr.
Thank you, Councilor. Seconder?
Second, Mr. Mayor.
Willis, all in favor? Carried, thank you. And with that, we will turn off Teams and good night, everybody.